Thank y'all very much. I only came up here to get the clicker, so I'll come back down with y'all. Y'all having a good night or what? Or what? Who said what? One person said what? Let me talk to you for a second. How are you?
Doing fine, sir. How are you?
You sure?
I'm sure.
You brought your lovely lady with you.
That's right.
You're living in America. You're in South Carolina. 34 years? You said 3 or 4 years? 34 years. God bless y'all. I won't ask you anything about anniversary dates. Say again? There you go. Not when, but the date. Very good. Well, let me just say this. I am very excited to be back at home. When I spoke at the Charleston County Convention on Friday night, I just flew in, and the first words that popped in my mind when I landed was, thank God for Charleston County. Because where I spend, I'd clap too, for where I spend all the time, it's a freak show. It literally is. And not much is, how many of y'all were here for the last time we did a town hall meeting? Wow. Thank you all for coming back. You've heard some of this before, but you'll hear it again because we must reinforce the facts. And the facts are not necessarily always pretty, but they're very important to know those facts. Now, I understand that you brought a whole group from Michigan, right? Is this your row of Michigan? All right. So God bless y'all for coming. I'm hoping you're moving here and bringing all your resources and revenues. You do? All right. Well, come on down here and live here with us. Here's what I want you to know without any question. The best days of our country are still ahead of us. We have heard so much about the demise of this wonderful republic that most of us oftentimes find ourselves a little bit nervous about whether or not the future can be as bright as the past. Now remember, this is the nation that has overcome 2 world wars, survived the Great Depression, ended communism as we knew it. We can do all things. But it starts by getting serious and understanding the challenges that are before us. So while I'm very optimistic about where we're going, it is because I know that it's going to take a little work that I want to make sure that we understand that which undergirds the problems that we face today. So let's take a look. It's not about me. Now, I'm still a young guy. I feel like I've got a long way to go. I'm going to live at least 50, maybe 70 more years on earth. Right? Now, that wasn't supposed to be funny. That was just telling you the truth. All righty then. Well, it's about the next generation of Americans. All that we're doing right now is to make sure that the foundation is firm for the next generation of Americans. So it's really not about me, and it's not about most of us. It's can we make sure that the American dream is alive, it is well and whole for the next generation. The greatest generation made the ultimate sacrifice in so many ways so that I could stand here before you today. So I feel like it's my responsibility and your responsibility sometimes to make those necessary sacrifices so that we find ourselves passing on to the next generation the greatest American dream with the most people having the greatest access to it as possible. Now, there are some things that stand in the way of that dream. One of the things that stands in the way of that dream is out of control spending. Anyone aware of the fact that we might be spending more money than we're taking in as a government? Will you please raise your hand? Okay. So the rest of y'all are just sleeping all the time. I understand that only 53% of the people paying taxes anyways. So now we know what the 47% are. Here's the fact. We, Ron, have a problem. And we have a big problem that we can solve. Now, the solution is going to take a decade for us to actually get ourselves really on track. But we can get there, and we must start today. And every day thereafter must move us closer to and not further away from our dreams, our ambitions, and our solvency. Here is what we're spending. Now, think about this. We are spending $3.5 trillion in your federal government. $3.5 trillion. Just for a comparison, China's entire economy, $6 trillion and some change. Korea, 15th largest economy in the world, all that they produce, $1 trillion. This government is spending nearly $3.5 trillion. And when you think about our plan for prosperity, the path to prosperity, here's what I continue to say. In order for us to prosper, we have to cut our spending, we have to reform our taxes, we have to reform the entitlement programs that we have, cut out the red tape that stops businesses from creating jobs, and restore confidence. If we do those 5 things, the path to prosperity is absolutely guaranteed. And I know this to be true because as a kid who grew up right here in North Charleston, in the worst of times, I emerged out of that with a strong help, as most of you know, with a mama who raised me in a single-parent household that kicked my, can you say that? Kicked my backside. She jacked me up, held me firm in my face, and told me, boy, you're going to be something when you grow up, right? Has your mama ever told y'all, if y'all remember the days? I know your mama told you, because she's sitting right there. Boy, I brought you into this world, and I can take you out. We need some of that love. That's the tough love we need in this country. For us to actually examine where we are, we must deal with reality. Now, here's the challenge. If we're going to cut spending, here's where we're going to cut it. And the biggest challenge is if we are going to reform our taxes, many people are concerned that by reforming our taxes, we actually will have fewer dollars coming in. I'm going to deal with that in a little while. Finally, we must reform our entitlement programs. Now, this thing does not point. Oh, yeah, okay. So from this point here, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest, and mandatory spending, this entire part of the pie is mandatory spending and entitlement spending. What's important about that? When I start talking about entitlement reform, what I'm talking about is finding a way to slow the growth in those areas. Now, this is really important, and you'll see why in a few minutes. But just remember, when we start talking about entitlement reform, we have to seriously look at how long can we do what we're currently doing? And the answer is not much longer. Now, let's take this $3.4 trillion. Anybody got $3.4 trillion I can borrow? Thank you, ma'am. Can we talk after this? Thank you very much. Now, $3.4 trillion is a lot of money. Would y'all agree? Let's just call it 34,000 for the sake of digestion. All right? So we're going to spend $34,000. Now, when you do your budget at home, how many of y'all decide how much money you're going to spend before you take a look at your income? Anybody do that? I tried it when I was 20. I don't recommend that. That takes a credit card. And then you go back to the bank and you have the nerve to ask for more money. That's called lunacy, right? So look at this. This is what we bring in as a nation. And the most important part is it's $2.1 trillion. Let's call that 22,000. We are going to set a budget at almost 35,000, and we know we're not going to make more than 22,000. That is where the entire picture falls apart. You can't go any further than these first 2 slides without asking yourself the most obvious question: how long can you do that? How long can we produce a $1.4 trillion deficit or $14,000 deficit and find yourself on the road to prosperity? You can't. Spending 3.4, almost 3.5, and you're bringing in 2.1. Now, the critical part is the math. So you're spending 3.4, you're bringing in 2.1, so it leaves you with $1.3 trillion deficit. Now, that's an annual number, a $1.3 trillion deficit that we add on top of the $14 trillion deficit debt we already have. And this is where the plot thickens. Social Security in 1950 had 16 people working for every one retired. Now, let me just say this. That retired person only lived about 3 to 3.5 years. And then they went on to be with the Lord. Now, I like some of y'all in this room. I don't like all y'all, but I like some of y'all in the room, okay? So I want y'all to be around for a little while. Some of y'all want to retire and live longer than 3 years, right? Okay. So by the time we get to the last couple of years, we have 3 working, 1 retired, but the one that is retired lives for 15 years. What's wrong with y'all? You didn't die in 3 years. You're living for 15 years. We can't afford you to stay alive. We can't ask people to die. Well, they're dying. Well, they're going to die under this debt. I can tell you that right now. But we want people to live as long as possible. As a matter of fact, when you look at the things happening in the medical world, we're going to probably live longer. Not with Obamacare, right. The smart people sit right here on the front row to the right, good looking fella, but this is all together here. Y'all just hang out with me. So here's the fact. If, in fact, we have 3 people working, 1 retired, and now the system says we pay you forever, should we take a look at the age of retirement? Right? Now, would a wise person say that the longer we live, perhaps we ought to index that retirement age to something more realistic than nothing? Well, almost everything's more realistic than nothing, right? Therefore, the answer I would say is yes. Should we give incentives for younger people to actually save for their own retirement? And should we allow for an incentive program called tax deductions to encourage you to save for yourself and still support the greatest generation? The Paul Ryan's budget, y'all familiar with the Paul Ryan budget? Does something very similar to that. What it basically speaks to is that if you're 55 or older, you get what you currently have. But if you're 54 or younger, it is time for us to reintroduce our entitlement programs. It also, of course, eliminates national health care, also known as, there you go. I clap for that too. Now, if this was Sunday, I'd say somebody should say amen. Amen. Hallelujah. Okay, I'm sorry. I have to have a good time up here. You know, you guys are like, so if you saw your faces, you'd want to put on a show too, okay? Talk to the Michigan folks?
They're here. They're right here.
Okay, good. So here's the deal with the entitlement spending, and this is where it gets kind of interesting. Think, if you will, that in 1970, only 42% of our spending was considered automatic. By 2010, it's 62%, and by 2040, it's 76%. In other words, built into our spending are automatic increases at which we cannot sustain. So 76% is where we're heading. Because once you qualify for the entitlement, you never unqualify until... Now, don't y'all Facebook me and tell me that Tim Scott wanted to kill everybody because they were living too long. I know someone's going to do that. Tim, don't do that to me now, all right? I did not say that, so let's get the facts straight. But when you are having an automatic spending mechanism that is triggered as we retire and the baby boomers are coming on at a very fast and furious pace, this is not sustainable. 3.4, 2.1. We've got to manage our retirement differently. But when I start talking about Social Security, I'm not even talking about the biggest challenge we have. Medicare is a far greater challenge for us than is Social Security. Social Security, you actually pay into it, and you've paid for your own retirement to some extent. Medicare is increasing at 8% compounded a year. Said differently, it's increasing at more than 40 billion compounding interest every year. That eclipses everything we can keep up with. We have to change it. One of the reasons why the Republican budget transforms Medicare as we know it, not for anyone 55 or older, but for those younger. So if you're 50, say it with me, if you're 55, stay alive, all right? If you're 55, okay, so 13 of y'all got it right. If you're 55, we can afford to do what we're doing if you're 55 and older. We cannot, however, do it for someone who's my age. I think if you're a member of Congress, the laws you pass, you should live under, right? So every law that I pass, I plan to make sure that it impacts me first. So I understand what in the world it's going to feel like to be one of us. So we should be one of us. Bottom line, right? Thank you, sir. So we're going to feel the same pain in the same places. And in order for me to do that, I need to make sure that the retirement system, the Medicare suggestions or recommendations that we're making, I live under those exact things now, not later. And by doing so, what I believe we do is we transform our entitlement scenario into an equation that we can live with. Because under the current environment, Medicare pays out more money than it takes in at 2020, 9 years from now. I'm not talking about 20 or 30, not 2076, not 2040, not 2050. We're talking about 2020, the number of dollars that go out exceed the number of dollars coming in. Unsustainable. Completely unsustainable. So what should we do? Well, we have to find a way to cut off the automatic increases. We do that by the way we transform the system. Anyone familiar with Medicare D? Medicare D? Medicare D has saved us billions upon billions of dollars because of the cost controls that happen with competition. It is actually one part of the entire overall facet of Medicare that is actually driving our costs down. The approach that Paul Ryan and others have crafted together is driven by the same philosophy that drives Medicare D, that through competition in the cafeteria plan, we actually get a better bang for our buck under the current proposal of the premium subsidy. So what actually happens for those who are 54 or younger under Medicare is that you get to pick and choose the benefits that are important to you based on your own health conditions. You find the company in the private sector that matches those benefits that you need, and you're able to purchase it, and the government sends the money straight to the company. So there's no voucher system that I'm sorry. I'm trying not to be very partisan tonight, but it's just too bad, okay? So the whole nonsense about vouchers for Medicare and destroying the system, all that stuff that you keep hearing, it's hogwash. It's just hogwash. Never going to happen under the Republican scenarios. It just does not exist. They are willing to demonize conservatives, demagogue the issue for the sake of being reelected, even at the expense of America's bankruptcy. That's nothing, there's no integrity in that process whatsoever. And this is so telling. So the reason why we ought to be very concerned about our entitlement spending, our deficit spending, is because 47% of our debt is owned by foreign nations. How do you negotiate with China when they own 30% of your debt? We can't do that. we continue to have these little, altercations with China that we are not going full throttle into because they'll manipulate their currency. They'll devalue their currency and hold on to ours. There's no such thing as a level playing field. There should be no, favored nation status in our trade agreements. We have to recognize that when someone else owns 47% of your debt, the book of Proverbs talks about the borrower is a slave to the lender. We're getting really close to being in that position. We're going to hold all the questions for the end, sir. I saw that too. That's a good point, though. That is exactly where we're heading, and that's why we have to shift the trajectory. We have to bend the trajectory in the right direction. We can't solve this problem overnight. I'm just going to tell you the truth. There aren't any genies in the bottle, and they're not popping out. We can't solve this problem overnight. But by taking back control of our future, of our destination, we take back control of every single day of our lives and the lives of the future Americans. And that's our responsibility. And this is where we have to divert this number from getting over 50% and then getting over 55%. I think we can stop it before it gets to 60 and reverse it. But it's going to take pain. I'm trying to sell you on two things tonight. One is I'm okay. Tim Scott is still okay. Let's be honest. I'm your Congress member. I work for you all. I'm your servant. I'm not your boss. I don't make the rules. I live by what you all tell me is the most important issues. I live by those issues 18 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week. You're my boss. I'm here telling you I'm doing a good job, and I want you to know that I am. Now, we may disagree on what the definition of a good job is sometimes. We do that sometimes, right? I'm okay with that. But I work for you. But for me to be a good employee, I got to tell you the truth, boss. You're unaware of the fact that perhaps the company is going broke. Now, most of you all in this room are not unaware of that fact. But what I'm telling my Congress members, my Republican Congress members, is we must go back at home and sell our people on reality. It is our responsibility to lead with the truth. Ugly, unattractive, undeniably not where we want to be, but the truth is the truth. The last half a century, we've been deceiving ourselves, and now the buck stops here. So with that being the truth, I'm asking for you all to understand that as we make progress, we are going to have a harder time digesting the pills than the last generation, because we are the generation of the truth, and we must digest it now so that the next generation has a nation. So that's really what I'm doing here. And I look forward to answering questions that are not financial, but the first 100 days of my life in Congress has looked like this. My head in my hand, saying, what in the world have we been doing? I got a 19-year-old with a credit card limit of $200,000. Spend, baby, spend. And the worst thing we could ever see happen is just happening. Standard & Poor's come out with a negative response to our debt. And the president begged them behind closed doors, please don't do that to us. Well, Standard & Poor's said, I didn't do it to you. I'm just reporting the facts. We did it to ourselves. And so while this is a painful process for me to go through, I'm trying to make it a little bit entertaining at times, but in the end, there it is. And I'm going to make cuts to good programs, hopefully eliminate bad programs, but there aren't enough bad programs for us to eliminate. We're going to have to cut into the meat. I am completely sold on the fact that there are some things that the United States of America's government ought not do. And we should just stop it. And if it hurts, it hurts. That's just the truth. Some things we can't afford to do. Period. And nothing's off the table. Nothing's off the table. I mean, nothing is off the table. There is waste or fraud or abuse in everything. And the unions, we're going to get to the unions. I'll just go there right now. How many of y'all have heard today that the unions are now suing Boeing for moving to South Carolina? You heard from me? Okay, good. I bring it forth bad news. Boeing moved to South Carolina because on September 15th, 2009, their employees, the employees at the North Charleston plant, decided to let their union go because they understood that they wanted to be more competitive in our own country. They wanted to be more competitive in attracting more jobs for their friends and families by having no union presence at the Boeing plant. And it worked. And now the same union employees are suing, not here, but Washington, are suing Boeing. And the NLBR, that one too, yeah. I did go to Stall High School, so give me a little break here. Yeah, all of them, they're entertaining this as reality. We don't have the money for it. It's just crazy. It's the craziest thing I've ever heard. So we are going to have the fight of our lives over unions because the unions, in my opinion, are symbolic of that entitlement mentality that maybe it started in a good place, but in the year 2011, life has changed, and we got to catch up with the times. All right. If I keep going at this pace, y'all won't have any time for questions. What time do you got here? Ron? Oh, good, I'm out of time. Which means I'm not. Thank you, sir.